Hello, today I'm going to be talking about the book Dear Edward by Napolitano. Dear Edward is the story of a young boy, just 12 years old, who experiences a terrible plane crash, and he is the only survivor of this crash. His whole family is on board, as well as many other people, and unfortunately they do not survive. Edward is the only survivor, and the story really follows his journey to recover from this traumatic experience and try to make the most that he can out of his life and preserve the memories of those that were lost. So it follows his teenage years and his life after the crash, and it also gives us a little glimpse of the lives of other people on the plane who did not survive. So it's kind of a multifaceted story, but it's mainly concerned with Edward and his struggle to live a normal life after experiencing something so terrible and losing his whole family. So this is a very powerful and very heavy premise. I think the premise is really interesting and it had a lot of potential to be a beautiful novel. However, for me, this book fell short in a lot of ways. Plot-wise, there's not a ton happening. It's a very character-driven novel, and the unfortunate fact for me is that I did not connect with the characters in this book, and I did not really care about what happened to them one way or another. The character of Edward, he is fine. I didn't hate him, I didn't find him to be terrible or annoying, but I wasn't particularly rooting for him. It's not like I couldn't put it down because I just really cared about what was going to happen with his life. I just didn't have strong feelings one way or another, and I think that's all due to the way that the characters are set up and defined. They're all just a little bit bland, and you can tell there's attempts to make them unique and compelling, but the attempts just don't work for whatever reason, and the characters feel bland, and in my opinion they feel disconnected from the reader and disconnected from one another as well. The relationships between the characters weren't really that powerful to me. I think the relationship between Edward and his brother were quite powerful, but the rest of the relationships didn't really stand out to me, and unfortunately in a novel like this, that's what's supposed to keep you engaged, and it didn't keep me engaged. The other characters, a character named Shay is Edward's best friend. Once he survives a plane crash, she's there to support him through his recovery, and I didn't really like her character at all. She was bland in my opinion. She wasn't particularly interesting. So unfortunately I had a hard time pushing myself through this novel and appreciating it, just because I wasn't really connected to any of the characters, and I was pretty ambivalent as to what happens to them. I also found that the structure of following Edward's story, but then also giving little portraits of the people who passed away in the plane crash, it didn't really work for me. There's just that structure in itself is flawed in my opinion, because you know that all these people are going to pass away, so why would I care, about their life and about who they were and everything if I just know they're going to die? There's nothing that's keeping me engaged in a story like that, unless it was the most incredible writing ever, unless it was so beautifully written. But the writing is pretty standard. It's definitely well written, but it's not gonna be enough to keep you engaged when you know that the characters aren't going to survive and that there's not that much that they can do. So I found that structure to be flawed, and I found the character of Edward to be a little disappointing and just not particularly engaging, and unfortunately these are important aspects of the novel, and so it failed for me in a lot of ways. That being said, there are some redeeming qualities here. The writing is really beautiful. There are a lot of really cool passages, and I appreciate that the author did her research on planes, and you can tell she put a lot of thought into the actual logistics and the technical aspects of the plane crash, which I think is smart because it's such a devastating event that it's almost kind of like offensive to just write it off like, oh, the plane just crashed, you know? So it's really, there's a lot of detail about what happened to the plane and what caused it to crash. And I do feel that that made the story feel more real and more powerful. So again, you know, there's a lot that is beautiful in here and a lot of really cool writing. But it wasn't enough for me to say that I enjoyed this novel or that it stood out for me compared to other things that I've read. So unfortunately, I can't really recommend this book. I know other people have really enjoyed it and have had great things to say about it, so they can recommend it. I personally will not recommend it just because it's not an exciting book to me and it didn't stand out from other things that I have read that are in a similar genre. So I wasn't the biggest fan of this book. I do think the premise is really cool, but it just didn't do it for me. I didn't connect with the characters, and there's just not a lot of tension and a lot of plot to keep you engaged. It's very just kind of like on the same level the whole time, and if you're not loving the characters, you're not going to be excited to read what happens next. So unfortunately, this book would be a 5 out of 10 for me. I didn't love it. It's definitely not a bad book, but I just didn't enjoy it, and I found it hard to get through, and I had to really push myself to keep reading it. So thank you guys for tuning in. You know, I don't like to be so negative because this book is it clearly has beautiful intentions and a really beautiful message. So I hate to be negative, but I just have to be honest about what I thought, and I don't want to recommend something that I don't think is particularly enjoyable to read. So the book that I'm reading right now that I started after I finished this is absolutely amazing so far. I won't say what it is, but I started reading it last night and I'm already almost halfway through, and it's a long book. So for me, that's a good sign. That means that it's a really, really fast moving and exciting book. So hopefully I'll finish that pretty quickly, and I'm really excited to talk about that. Hopefully the second half is as amazing as the first. So definitely stay tuned for that review, but thank you for watching.